Osamah my year. I'm a junior, Victoria, class of 2021. He's going to introduce himself super briefly, like what you're majoring in, I guess your activities at Williams.
Yeah. Hey everyone. Hey Vicky. My name is Osamah. I'm a originally class of 21 economics major, but now I'm class of 2021 and a half, which I guess we'll talk about soon. I'm from New Jersey, and I'm interested in a wide variety of subjects. I'm particularly interested in the transit industry, advertising, and I guess the business side of both. And again, we'll go over some of the things that I've done in both of those things.
Yeah. So I know you made a decision to go, like you said, become 2021 and a half. Like that was a semester off instead of, I know you guys were going to go abroad. Um, what did you go to do?
Yeah, so it was a really weird decision, and it didn't really feel like I was making the decision until well beyond the date. So I was originally supposed to go to the IES Vienna program abroad, and very last second, I decided to forego that opportunity and instead join the startup that I was with for part of the summer. And so the company is called Halo. It's essentially we put LED screens on top of moving vehicles, particularly Ubers and Lyfts and some taxis, and they showed location-based advertising. And so they showed not only location-based advertising, but advertising based off of other factors such as weather or a plethora of other things. So I had a really good experience towards the end of the summer, and um, you know, deciding to not do study abroad was super difficult. And then deciding to instead also take a semester off and push my, I guess, Williams education by a semester was also another really big decision.
Yeah. And what was, I guess, like friend and family support like for that decision?
Well, see, I mean, my parents have like a very uh, particular view of like what school is supposed to be about. Um, I mean, I'm pretty sure you can't graduate early at Williams, but my dad was always like, "Oh, finish school early so that you can move on, try to get a master's, all that kind of stuff." So my parents were fully supportive at first, but after some explaining and helping them understand what I was trying to do and why I was doing it, they were very supportive. And so I guess if any Williams students are considering taking a semester off, just like try your best to really help them understand and not just simply tell them what you're doing, but why you're doing it, why you think it's going to help, and whatnot. Usually, at least from in my case, my parents were understanding, which was very helpful.
Mm.
As for friends, I was leaving for what I think was a very cool idea, and a lot of my friends thought so too. So it was nice to see that support as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I think I'm also just really curious, as someone who's really interested in startups and whatever, what really was the instigator behind your decision to like, yes, I'm going to take a semester off? I think people at Williams are very invested in school, and I wonder what that was. It like a mental like breakthrough, or was it just kind of
So
to do it?
I was like fighting with myself in terms of making the decision for weeks. It was a really, I mean, personally, I love my time at Williams. I was incredibly excited about being abroad in Vienna. I was going with two really good friends. But I was supposed to go with two really good friends. Um, so I was lucky enough to I had a very good experience, and I felt like I was bringing a lot of value to the team. So they had offered me a small equity stake. That
Okay.
was a big. So it was partially a financial decision.
Hmm.
From a career perspective, I thought it would, like be very helpful in terms of meeting the right people, give me a good experience to later on start my own thing.
Hmm.
So it wasn't really a breakthrough kind of thing. When I did get the offer, with in terms of an equity stake, that was probably the biggest like one step in terms of the decision making process. But it was very much asking myself over a long period of time, what exactly are my goals? What do I want to do? Why do I want to do them? And so little by little, I found myself on this side of like, yeah, I think, taking a semester off, it only pushes, my schooling by one semester. And, who knows, this could really take off and whatnot. And so that's why I ended up making the decision.
For sure. Yeah. Um, could you talk a little bit about your work? Like, what were you doing during your internship and then how that changed into your full-time role with an equity stake. And I guess, what do you think made you deserve that equity stake?
Right. So when I joined in the summer, it was just to give brief context, the way I came across this opportunity. One of my really close friends is one of the founders of the startup, and he was taking time off. So this is still the very early stage. He was taking time off for something else, and he wanted me to step into his place. And so I was one of three team members working on the startup, and so I had a very big role.
So your
Um,
total team was three.
yeah, at the very start, it was three people. And so I had a very big role. I was, the way I like to think about it, there's three parts to any early stage startup. There's supply, demand, and product. So in terms of product, we had a coder, he was developing the app.
Mm-hmm.
And then for demand, we had someone who was ex Google Ads employee. He was handling all of the advertiser demand for our screens on the Ubers and Lyft. And so I was dealing with supply, and that involved sourcing the monitors themselves, in terms of also the supply of drivers that we needed to put the monitors on,
Mm-hmm.
and everything in between. So supply, operations, logistics. So that's essentially what I did. And then over time, as the demand, as in the work demand, got a little bit larger, we added more people to the team, and so I became a part of a three-member team in terms of the supply side. And so obviously I was doing a lot of work for them, and so they decided to bring me on board for the fall.
Did you have to negotiate anything on your own behalf, or was it, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, you said it was like close friends, so do you think it was seamless because of that?
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely was very lucky. It was a small equity stake, but it was generous considering that I'm haven't even finished college, and so that was good. I had also never negotiated an equity package before,
Yeah.
so I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was lucky that they were friends, and so uh, because they knew what they were doing, they were guiding me through the process. So if anyone is ever going through that, I guess you just have to reach out and ask people you trust. Um, but it is a complicated process, but it's not non-manageable.
Hmm. I think some people might be surprised by the team size. Could you talk a little bit about how Coachler is when it's only three people, and then like workflow? I assume many things are your own goals oriented around like your schedule, but what was that like?
So it was, first of all, it was an amazing experience. If just as a side note, if anybody can take time off school for a startup, and it like it is a good idea, and you have a strong team around it, do it. Like one semester at the end of the day isn't the end of the world. Even if like it doesn't turn out well, it is one semester. I personally, even if Halo had failed, I still would have like recognized a lot of value from it. So in the beginning, the team size was three, and it was that way for almost a few months actually.
Hmm.
And it was incredibly demanding. Our plan was to keep the team small and lean and quick moving. So that meant each of us had to progressively take on more and more work. And considering the fact that we lived in, so we were based in Brooklyn, and we lived in an apartment in which we worked out of. And
Yeah.
so work and life balance was, well, there was no balance. It was all mixed up into one thing. We would wake up together, make breakfast together, meet in the morning, and then we had core hours where we would each fulfill our core responsibilities and duties. And
Okay.
then we would have more brainstorming sessions later in the day, and then continue working. So you're pretty much working until, we were working from around 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then you were on call for the rest of the night. As in, if we had any tasks that needed to be done, you needed to be working until I guess you slept. So it was very tough, especially because it was a smaller team. As time went on and we brought more people on, it was a bit easier because I guess things become easier because you have more ideas on the floor, more people to take on spontaneous tasks and whatnot. So while it was a challenge, again, it also wasn't non-manageable. It's also, if this is a startup you really believe in, if it's an idea you believe in, and if it's a team you believe in, I found it relatively easy to pick up those tasks and I guess work into the night.
Okay, for sure. And do you think that like was it a good thing or bad thing that there wasn't much of a work-life balance? Like I can't imagine not having like a home away from an office.
Yeah,
If that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. Um, so in my experience, I felt I was a bit lucky where it was amazing. I enjoyed every minute of it in the beginning. So yeah, so for the first few months, it was amazing. But then over time, it did get stressful. The work obviously was getting more and more difficult, especially towards the end of the year.
Hmm.
Um, and um, Things started to get stressful. Like I said, work was getting heavier and harder, and it would have been nice to be able to step away at the end of the day and go to my own place and whatnot. But it also was a financial decision to work where we to sleep where we worked,
Hmm.
um, or to live where we worked, um, or rather we work where we lived. Like it was a nice apartment in Brooklyn, and we just worked out of it. So it would have been nice to be able to step away, but it also was a good financial decision to instead save money. And also, in a way, it does make you more productive because just naturally you're going to be working more. You're in a better position to, you're with the team 24/7. If anything arises, you're right there to brainstorm. And a lot of things did arise, a lot of like big problems, things that we thought were insurmountable at first, but then you just sit together, brainstorm, and you like come through with a solution.
Got it. Could you actually go into more of your role as supply in that triangle? Like, I guess how much of your day was spent, I don't know, contacting people about sourcing, like drivers or sourcing materials? What was that like?
Yeah. So I can do it in two ways. So first, I'll just describe what my day to day was like, and then also what exactly happened from the beginning of, uh, I guess, the startup to the end. So at first, so we would wake up pretty early, 7, 8 a.m. I don't know. Sometimes we go to the gym. We'd make breakfast, whatever. So we'd have morning check in at 9 a.m. So 9 to 9:30, where we would all orient. We would talk about what we're going to do for the day. If any two team members or more need to collaborate, you would agree on what time and whatnot. And then you have something called core hours. So starting either like 9:30 or 10 a.m. all the way till 4 p.m. This is where you're fulfilling your core responsibilities. So my actual title was head of driver growth, and so my core duties were to make sure that we were recruiting drivers at mass,
Mhm.
in order to put those monitors on their vehicles. Um,
How did you know where Atmas was? Like, who defined that for you?
so I like it changed actually over the course of time. So and I'll get to that in a second. So 4 p.m. to like 6 p.m. you're still working. Usually you're finishing up on your core duties. You're working with the other team members, and then 6 p.m. and afterwards, if there are any things you want to get ahead on or any processes that you want to start creating, we used a lot of like automation softwares because we were so few, managing so much work. So for my job personally on the supply side, I needed to find our first drivers for us to install our monitors on.
Right.
And so again, we're searching for Uber and Lyft drivers. These are we want good drivers who are driving in high density areas, preferably Manhattan, Brooklyn, and then in Chicago, you want Center City, and we also did in Philadelphia and some others. Um, I was looking for drivers who drove a lot because our first few monitors that we put on the car, we wanted them out on the road as much as possible. So
Yeah.
first, I would go to areas where a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers were. So it literally started off as me going to LaGuardia Airport, going to the little Uber and Lyft lots where they would wait for passengers. And I would literally just give them a business card and explain to them what we were doing, and be like, "Please just sign up, and you can earn extra money every month just by you're not changing anything you're doing. You're just putting a monitor on top of your car, and it's showing ads, and you're earning money." And it was very hard at first, but then there's always that little breakthrough point. So once we had our first 10 drivers, 15 drivers, 20, we had enough out on the road that a lot of other drivers were seeing it, and they were asking them about it. And I would also give a ton of business cards to drivers who are out on the road so they could just give the other people interested my number, and then they would get in contact with me, and then I could get in contact with them. So at that point, growth was pretty organic. Other drivers would see the monitors out on the road, and they're like, "Oh, are you like earning money on that?" They're like, "Yeah, we are." And so call this guy. And so at that point, it started to become very tough because I was getting calls literally every 30 seconds. Um, and so at that point, we were getting a lot more inbound than I was going out and searching for it. And
Mhm.
it got so I guess, bad by the end of it that we had to turn off the application site because we had so much interest. So it was an interesting point because you start off and you say like, wow, this is really hard and I don't know how we're ever going to grow. And then you don't really, I guess you just like put your head down and keep working at it. And then soon enough, you're going to be at a point where, I guess a point where you wouldn't have imagined you could be.
For sure. Did people, I think one fear that I definitely would have as a college student taking time off is that you haven't graduated yet. I don't know how much like a high school diploma can do for you. What was like, how do you make yourself more credible, or like, did people take you seriously and how did you get that across?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of ways you can go about it. Personally, I think so. College degree is incredibly important. I really do think so. However, there are some spaces where it just never really comes up. And so, see, the thing was like last summer, so it was a bit weird where I would go into meetings where I myself would be like, wow, I have like, I'm like talking to people twice my age. These people are very official. They're like very good at what they do. And so I would try to find ways to, I guess, look more credible. So no one's going to ask you, oh, did you graduate college when doing business? If you have a good idea and you present yourself well enough, there's no reason for them to ask.
Mm-hmm.
You're there for a very specific reason. And if you can fulfill that reason well, then that's about the extent of that conversation. But there were instances where they'd be like, oh, aren't you a little young to, I don't know, it gives me Phineas and Ferb flashbacks. I don't know if you ever watched the show, but anyhow, they're like, aren't you a little young to, like, are you in school? Or I'm like, yeah, no, I'm taking time off school. And in fact, they thought it was very impressive most of the time. Be like, oh, if he's taking time off school for this, it must be a good idea. It must have a lot of potential. So there's that side in terms of the business itself and
Mm-hmm.
taken seriously. On the other side of like, so I always knew I'd go back to school. It was never my intention to stay at Halo for longer than a year and a half, maybe max 2 years. It would be a little bit tough going back to school, especially a place like Williams, very close-knit community. It's, most of your friends will have graduated by that point. But it was a sort of social risk and financial risk and academic risk that I was willing to take. I just based off of my situation and my circumstances, considering the idea I really believed in, considering that the company had already had investors and whatnot by the time I had joined in. So I wasn't really concerned if I lost a semester or a year, if it all like blew up or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. But just to clarify, so I think it was almost like you kind of just hopped right into your role. Like, I don't know if everyone going into a supply role like yours could just go and say, you know what, I'm gonna go look for drivers at LaGuardia because that's where they are. Like, I don't. How
So
much?
yeah, so here's the thing. When I had joined, I had no idea what to do. It was when my friend had like, uh, I guess he had recommended me to the other two co-founders. He was like, listen, he's a smart guy. He can take care of himself, and just give him a job and he'll try to figure it out. Uh, just also as a side note, most of the time when you're in a startup, you're going to have to figure things out. You're not going to be prepared for a lot of the things that you need to do. I had never been trained in like how to recruit drivers. I'd never worked with automation softwares and tools. I'd never done any of that. I barely had even used like Excel or any like, but I guess that's the whole point. Is just you have to be explorative and you have to be willing to learn and you have to pick up on skills very quickly, which are things that most Williams students can do. And here's the trademark, like liberal arts well-roundedness. So I don't think it's important that Williams students don't know many technical skills. What I think is important is their ability to learn them, which often can happen very quickly. As long as you're curious and you're confident and you push forward and you spend a lot of time trying to learn those new tools, you'll pick it up in no time.
For sure. So, piggybacking off of what you mentioned with Williams students, is this something you would definitely like? Is there like a Williams advantage? And then if so, is there also a Williams disadvantage in, I guess,
Mhm.
this kind of early stage startup area where I think also a lot of schools might be more structured surrounding like venture and like startups and really facilitating that. I don't know how much of that infrastructure is at Williams. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So this opportunity I didn't get through Williams, which so
Right.
it's a little hard to say, but I have gone to like the Career Center and talked to Mr. Palmer, right? He's very helpful. So there isn't a ton of startup structure at Williams, and
Right.
that is in a way a disadvantage. So the other three co-founders were all from UPenn, and they're like a very startup-y school.
Hmm.
So it was they have a ton of resources there. It's very advantageous for them. So there is a disadvantage in that way if you're looking at it relative to other schools. And to be frank, there aren't a ton of advantages otherwise. What I do think Williams students have an advantage in is something that they've picked up before they've gone into Williams. So your being at Williams is indicative of other things that I think would allow you to, find success in the startup
Hmm.
world. And that's usually being analytical, because remember, like a startup is a very wide term. There's all kinds of startups, and there's all kinds of ways that when you're analytical and you can understand something like at least a small part of everything, um, those advantages I think really do come out in startups. Because for me, I wasn't just doing my core tasks were like very wide in I don't know breadth, and so having that Williams academic analyticalness really did help in that way. So that is an advantage, I would think.
Okay, cool. Do you have any, I guess, last piece advice for students who might want to pursue what you pursued?
So I mean, if you have a chance to take a semester off, I would definitely encourage it. Don't just take a semester off and sit at home. Like before I came back to school, I got admitted for the spring and not for winter study. So I was sitting at home all of winter study, and I was just melting and super unproductive, very bored. So if you have a chance to do something outside of school for a semester, I would definitely take it. You could learn a lot. It's also a really good break from Williams. You're going to come back and start to again appreciate a lot of the things that maybe might have gotten old. I my first 2 years at Williams, I absolutely loved it, and I was like very sad even about going abroad. I was very sad leaving campus, and so taking a semester off and coming back only made me appreciate it even more. And again, I feel like it's given me the skills to move on and start other ventures and whatnot. So I would definitely encourage and look past that initial, I guess, sort of the discouragement of taking a semester off, especially at a place like Williams. It might even be like looked down upon. So I would heavily consider it.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.